Good day, dear students. You are welcome to our today's lecture on the course Translation Problems. The theme of our lecture is Equivalence in Translation, the second type of equivalence. Please write down the plan of our lecture. There are 2 points. First point is the notion of the situation and method of the description of the situation. Second point is characteristic features of the second type of equivalence. The increase in studying equivalence in translation coincides with the birth of a strong wave of research in machine translation. It was used then in its strict sense to refer to an absolute symmetrical relationship between words of different languages. The Russian-born American structuralist Roman Jakobson is one of the earliest theorists who were occupied by the study of equivalence in meaning. Jakobson claimed that there is ordinarily no full equivalence between code units. Nida's theory of translation is characterized by his distinction between two types of equivalence: formal equivalence and dynamic equivalence. In formal equivalence, the translator focuses on the message itself, that is, its form and content, as there should be a close similarity between the source text and target text message. This source-oriented type is described by Kelly as an approach that depends on one-to-one matching of small segments, on the assumption that the center of gravity of text and translation lies in the significance for terminological and artistic reasons. Translation equivalence occurs in source language and target language texts or items are related to the same, at least some of, relevant features of situation substance. Cultural equivalence aims at the reproduction of whatever cultural features the source text holds into the target text. These vary from things specific to the geographical situation, the climate, the history, the tradition, the religion, the interpersonal or intercommunity social behavior, to any cultural event having an effect on the language community. In the second type of equivalence, the common part of a content of source language text and target language text transmits not only the same purport of communication, but also reflects one and same extra-linguistic situation. The situation is a total combination of objects and connection between the objects described in the statement. Any text contains information about something, We cannot imagine a sentence or a text which is about nothing. The second type of equivalence reproduces the content of the original to a greater than in the first type. But it does not mean that all the semantic elements of the content are transmitted in the second type of equivalence. This translation points out at one and the same situation, but we see considerable structural and semantic discrepancy with a source language. One and the same situation can be described in many ways through different combinations of features peculiar to this situation. As a result, we get statements which are accepted by native speakers as synonymic in spite of the differences of their constituent parts. In connection with it, it is necessary to differentiate between the fact of pointing out at the situation and the way of its description or method of describing the situation. This method is a part of a statement pointing out the indications of the situation through which it is reflected in a statement. These pointed indications can be described through the category of notions, such as the category of state. For example, the book is on the table. The category of perception. For example, I see the book on the table. And the category of activity. For example, the book is put on the table. Those who use the language are able to distinguish the identity of statements described in different ways. For example, you are not fit to be in a boat. In these examples, we see that the majority of words and structures have no equivalence, but still we can see more community in the content between the original and the translation than in the first type of equivalence. There is some chemistry between us that does not mix. This sentence refers to the first type of equivalence. He answered the phone. This sentence refers to the second type of equivalence. In the first example, the things were referred to as a different point so that there is hardly any logical connection between the statements. The similarity of the original and the translation is restricted to the fact that in both cases we can draw identical conclusion about the speaker's attitude. In the second example, the incomparable language units in the original and the translation describe, in fact, the same action. The identical reality is that a telephone call cannot be answered unless one picks up the receiver. Both statements give different information about one and the same situation. For this type of equivalence, the following features are characteristic. First, absence of any parallelism of lexical and structural units. Second, the impossibility to connect the lexical and structural units of the original and the translation with the relations of semantic paraphrase or structural transformation. Third, retention of the reference to one and the same situation in translation. Fourth, retention of one and the same purport of communication in the original and the translation. In many cases, speakers use only one way of describing a situation, and it takes place in standard conversational formulas. For example, pull өзіңе қарай, push өзіңнен кері бағытта, wet paint абайлаңыз сырланған, keep off the grass көкшелекте жүрмеңіз. So, dear students, you have questions for discussion. There are 4 of them. So, be ready with these questions on your seminar lessons. First, speak on the notion of the situation. Second, speak on the methods of situation description. Third, describe characteristic features of the second type of equivalence. The fourth, give examples of the second type of equivalence and analyze them. Next, you are given references and supplementary literature which will be necessary for you during your preparation for your seminar lessons. Thank you for your attention.